Video. Thanks for tuning in and sharing in this now moment with myself and with one another. If you haven't seen these videos before, welcome back. If you have, my intention is unity and oneness. I'm going to just do a short kind of presentation here, no light language. So if you want a light language video, I invite you to go back and watch maybe one of the other ones that I've done. I had a request to do a whiteboard video, so I am doing it. This was what I've been shown in meditation, and so this is all from my own perspective. There are many different layers to what I'm about to share, and this will just be one particular layer today. We're going to delve a little deeper maybe in another video. So I kind of started a video, that's why I have all these scribbles here, and then I realized that I could have done it a little bit more clearly. So I'm kind of just going to keep this one as simple, yet quantum as possible. So the first thing I wanted to share is I was shown this triangle. Oops, I lost my pen. So I was shown this triangle, and if you want to screenshot this, if you're a nerd like me, you could screenshot it and zoom in and kind of read my writing a little bit later. But essentially, this triangle here was what I was shown. And this triangle had a bubble on each corner. Okay? What I was shown is this is essentially drawing together. And I'm sure this is sacred geometry. I'm sure there's more to this. I haven't read up on anybody else's symbols yet. I just wanted to kind of stay in flow with my own perspective until I do the research and kind of map this all together. And essentially what I was told was this is the compression chamber. I was also showed that there's some synchronicity having to do with the king's chamber and the pyramid, the pyramids all over the world. But in general, if you picture this as a triangle, but picture it as a three-dimensional triangle, although it's going to be more multi-dimensional than 3D, but that's kind of what it looks like. And what's happening is this compression, I was told it was like a toothpaste tube. But rather than pushing and pulling these energies, what's happening is it's compressing and then expanding out. And what's happening is our bodies, our exoskeleton, everything's being changed. And we are going through this space of compression. And everything pulls into the heart. So for many of us, there's been activation, and then we have time to recover, and then there's an activation, and then we recover. It's a little bit like scuba diving, and then you go through decompression, or you have to take time to acclimate to the energies. And basically what I'm hearing is that the acclimation period is over. We were stuck on a time loop, we were stuck on a bandwidth for a while that didn't necessarily allow us to accelerate through hyperspace, so to speak. Some of the words I'm using, I'm just staying in flow about. And it kept us on a certain speed. So we basically couldn't break the speed of sound or couldn't break the speed of light. And in reality, those were based on an old geometry and an old matrix, a reality system in which we were all playing within. And I was shown this bandwidth. So if you look at this bandwidth here, this ribbon, can you see that? Is this long band, okay? That's the higher one, we'll say. Then there's a zigzaggy one, right? That's below it. And these two streams were like this. One's down here and the other one's up here. And it's kind of like Ghostbusters. Don't cross streams, right? So most of the time we would dip up and we would feel these higher vibrations. But if we totally merged the streams together, the density was so heavy that it would just pull us back down. And so it was not really ever able for some people or for a large mass group of the collective to stick in that higher long wave. I'm going to talk a little bit about heart math, or what Dan Winters talks about with his Therify, and it's on fractalfield.com. I can't remember the name of it. Sorry, Dan. I'll have to share the link. Either way, it talks about the long wave, the heart coherence, keeping in that space of coherence for an extended period of time. That's all a play on words, by the way. So this extended period of time, okay, is where we were stuck on this time loop. And this had to do with time bandits, and that's another video. Time bandits that were essentially I'm hearing cubing us in. So we were boxed in, the Rubik's Cube, we were boxed into these particular units of charge. And it held a certain density and kept us in a lower, less fluid dynamic. okay? It wasn't as dynamic and fluid as a long wave is. So part of the long wave is being in a space of coherence, being in a space of neutrality, so that we can allow this flow, this fluidity in which we create from. So we were stuck in this pattern, and again, I don't choose to blame anyone for this. We're all making choices, but we were stuck in this pattern, and we could say that there were beings that were really set, truly, on keeping that lower density chamber. They wanted to keep us from one linear perspective from getting into these higher oscillating fields. And I'm not going to go into why or who, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't anymore, from my perspective. For some people it does, and that's okay. This is all just one perspective, and oops, I could go into 5 different perspectives. From another perspective, it does matter, and all of that is being corrected. From another perspective, it doesn't matter, because when we're in a place of coherence and we're creating from that space, that other stuff falls apart. It can't stick anymore. And from a broader perspective or quantum perspective, everything is connected. So we are all coming from the one source that is the dark and the light. So I could go on and on and on into the multidimensional perspectives, and it all depends on where we are, our angulation, our triangulation, and where we sit, how we see it, and how we view it. And we had many different perspectives that are in the process of merging and really drawing all of these energies together. So these lower bandwidths, what I was kind of told was they were a scribble in the dark. So they were scribbled in, and it was all of these like rat's nests is what I'm showing, what I was shown. All of these tangled up energies, because they were finite, they were not infinite. They were finite and drawing off of false systems that were established to create density. And the more density that they created, the less they could unfold, because it was so tangled up and scrambled. But what's happening is, because of the compression chamber, that actually, when you've got something that's under such pressure, think about this short wave that's down there. It's a scramble. It's like, and it starts to feel like this. And things have to crack, things have to shake in order for that pressure to be released, to be relieved. And on the flip side, from one perspective, if something is so dense that it's heavier and heavier and heavier, it's sinking and basically decomposing on itself, it's not able to create, it's only creating distortions that are inverted, which is where we were before. That doesn't work. It's not part of the creative, it's impermanent. Now, I've been guided to play a little bit with impermanence. We are not permanent. Nothing is permanent. Yet we are in a space of impermanence because we are infinite, if that makes sense. But the form in which we are expressing in, and that what we are creating from, is not permanent. It's meant to flux and to move. Living light. So, and all of these energies are meant to interact together. So if we're cut off and we are in a void space, or in a space where we are not connected, and we feel this disconnect, or we don't feel anything at all, that then decomposes. It will eventually, I'm hearing the words, and I was hearing this earlier, it eats itself. It eats its own energy in order to survive. And that's essentially what many of us have seen and are seeing now. Those are, it's not the same thing as eating your own tail, so to speak. It's less of a strange loop, and it's more of, again, density and non-creative. It's creating from a certain reality that was imploding, but not implosion in the sense of implosion in heart space creativity, literally where it could not continue. And eventually that reality has cracked, and all of the holes are coming through these cracks. and this Rubik's Cube of domination and control that was trying to box everybody in is unfolding now, because we've basically bridged this gap between these two bandwidths, where for a long time we weren't able to necessarily bridge the gap in the same way, because when you've got this going on here and you've got this going on over here, it's like you get zapped. You oscillate. For many of us who've gone through this awakening in our own way or going through it now, you feel literally like you just got zapped. You might get a download or an upgrade of information, and it feels like your whole sensory system is being fried. Because that higher frequency is something that when you're when you have a lot of density or you have a lot of trauma that you're hanging on to, fear, regret, anger, shame, blame, guilt, mistrust, all of those things create those little entanglements, and it causes knots in the system that are not the true knot, which is the strange loop, which is slipping through, constantly flowing in and out. Think of the infinity symbol too, strange loop. And instead, they're just like this, all scrambled up. And that's what this kind of looks like. Scrambled, 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 right? That's that lower frequency, lower density. But now what's happened is, I was shown that there's so many beings, light workers, starseeds, whatever terminology resonates with you, humans that are coming together that want a higher experience, that want to remember who they really are. And because of that, that has shifted us up into this higher bandwidth. I was also shown that not everybody wants to move with this shift. Some people are still stuck here. And while we are helping bridge those together, I was called a zigzagger in a meditation that I had recently. I zigzag in and I zigzag out, but I hold my coherence for the most part, that I can have but one foot in one and one foot in the other, and help kind of pull along people that want to take that jump, that want to go into those places. I am giving them the tools, or they are offering me, let me rephrase that. I am offering space in which they can move into that space as well, as many of us are, just by us holding our own frequency. Now, I just want to back up, back the Mac truck up. I've had a lot of stuff around Mac recently, but what we're also being guided to recognize is that if we are in a space where we happen to have a day or a week where we really have gone and dipped back into this, when we feel anxious and on edge, and it's like we really feel like we're quaking in our exoskeleton, because we are, and we're not able to balance this out because we are hanging on to all of this density, or maybe we're just in the process of processing. Sometimes that's what it feels like to process these things. What it can do is it can make us feel like, A, we've been hit by a Mack truck, and B, we can make choices in that moment to do things that may not necessarily be the healthiest or the smartest or the most emotionally stable, so on and so forth. My guides, my higher self, whatever linear term we want to call my higher version of me, basically I've been shown that's okay. Because if we're going to beat ourselves up over making these choices, that's way worse for us than just having a glass of wine or eating that donut, right? Or whatever it might be. And again, obviously, if we know that leads down the road to other poor choices one after another, then don't do it, right? Choose in that moment to know what's best for you and not fall into that rabbit hole of this scrambled, 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 right? I don't know if you can see that, but rat's nest, right? But what happens is it helps us to unpack the density. So all of these energies coming in from the sun, from our heart chamber, all of these activations that we're having are helping us to unpack the density. And that helps us to unwind all of those cords and rat's nests. And what happens is if we can just be patient with ourselves, and let's say we eat a donut. Let's say we eat 2 donuts. We're having a binge day. We eat a bag of Oreo cookies. I haven't done that in a long time, but I don't feel very good when I do that. We, rather than I should have, could have, would have, I can't believe I did that, I'm such fill in the blanks, let it go. Been there, done that. This is part of this time loop that I've been shown. So what I was shown is we were on this looping system. And if you look at like the Olympic circles, I've drawn this in another video, it's like you're on this spin and then you spin up into the next circle and then you get sucked back down again. And then you spin up into the next circle and then you get sucked back down again. That is more merging, morphing, converging together. And it's easier for us to stay in a place of coherence when we come into a place of acceptance and, of course, neutrality, which is also obviously directly interwoven and interconnected with coherence. So essentially, if we can forgive ourselves and say, you know what, I'm having a moment. I'm allowed to have this moment. I'm going to throw a tantrum. I'm going to stomp my foot. I'm going to feel anger. I'm going to feel like but own it. Rather than, oh, I know I shouldn't have done that. And bottom line is, then it's like us giving our ownership to shame. Here you go, shame, take over. But rather than that, I'm going to own it. I'm going to enjoy this donut. I'm going to love this donut. This sugar, I'm just going to embrace it. My taste buds are so happy right now. I'm really going to enjoy this. Maybe I'll take a digestive enzyme while I eat this donut. And instead of having a full cup of coffee, I'll have a cup of decaf. Compromise. And that's more control, and that's coming from a bigger place of neutrality than it is of us going up and down and up and down and up and down. And then once we recognize that we're owning that, it's no longer giving our power away to sugar. It's not giving our power away to the donut. And I'm just using this as an example. This could be for a lot of things. That's just one example. But what's happening is there are those that are stuck here. They're in the scramble section. Many of us are bridging that together so people have the opportunity. We're holding out our hands, and this is not a hierarchy thing from up here, but down here. Here, take my hand. People are either going to accept it or they're not. That doesn't mean we're here to push our hand in their face and say, you have to take my hand or you're going to fall apart. That then is taking them away or asking them to give their power to us, essentially. And that's something that's really difficult sometimes when we see someone going down that road of self-destruction. And what I hear is self-distortion, really. Self-destruction is self-distortion. When we have these distorted view of ourselves and reality and all of that, it can be really difficult to see through that. And it can be difficult for people to even see that there is a hand being offered to them. But we aren't the only ones offering out this hand. We're offering this hand by holding our own space, by holding space for others to decompress. And again, this is a reference to scuba diving. If you come up too fast and you don't decompress, right, you can get very sick. And I think a lot of us have experienced that in the Lightworker community. We get all these downloads and all these activations and all that density is just shaken off and we're like, oh, and then all of a sudden we don't feel so good because we got fried. Our senses were fried because of the higher vibrations that we were holding, yet we were still hanging on to all this density. So it was this push and this pull. But what I'm being guided to share is now it's more compression to expansion. And it isn't about how big we can expand, it's about how deep can we go at the same time. And that's that diving deep into the scuba. We're going into the ocean. We're in this ocean. And the deeper we go, the more expansive we get. For some people, going deep is really scary. Going into that shadow and going into that space of self-awareness. Others, going out into the universe and the cosmos and recognizing that we might not be alone. There may be ancient ancestors. That can be really scary. Recognizing that we are all connected. That can be really scary. So again, processing this fear and not really, I don't even want to say judging what it is, but just saying, oh, I shouldn't feel this way or I shouldn't feel that way. Why not? Why shouldn't you? What are we comparing that to? We are comparing that to a story, and that is, what I was shown is that let's pretend that we're creating our own documentary. We're creating our own documentary right now, right? Especially those of us that are on YouTube and social media sharing all this stuff. We're creating that. So what do we want to show? Who are we? And it's okay to be vulnerable. And it's okay to have moments where it's not very clear and have moments of clarity. All of this is part of the human experience. So I'm really being guided to really recognize that, especially right now. So there's 3 bubbles connected to this triad, okay? The center of this is pushing those bubbles away from each other. The edges and the angles are getting bigger. The universe is expanding, right? So these edges are going out, and one bubble is getting farther away from the other bubble, right? So we're going to feel this space between our old reality and our new reality sometimes. Those people from our past and those people from our current reality. And this is a very linear perspective, by the way, and I'll get back to this in a little bit more depth. But what we're also doing, though, is expanding those bubbles of reality. So while this is here and they're going farther apart, they're pushing away, they're also pushing away, they're also growing together. So because they're expanding out too. So all these bubbles of reality are expanding out, and everything is still connected by this main bubble of circle. It's the sound behind the sound, right? It's source. So it's still all connected. Yet there is this feeling of separateness from a lot of the things that are going on, because that is no longer the bubble that we want to create from. And in reality, from my perspective, we're absorbing that bubble. And that's another video perhaps for another time, but we're essentially digesting it. We're absorbing it. So all of this bandwidth down here, it's not like, it's not that we're just erasing it. We're writing over it. So we're taking this information and we're merging the two. I talked about this in my tsunami. You know, it's like a old, new, dark, light, whatever we want to call it, coming together and then creating a new port. And what I was shown was a new birth canal. So it's like this mergence. And then if you look at like the angle of the king's chamber and the pyramid, I was shown that we're changing our geometry. We're changing our directional spin. And then we're going off into another segment, so to speak. And that's been coming through a lot. This is a charge, it's a new time structure, a new self-worth. So all this stuff was coming through about per se. So we are, what do we value? Again, what do we want to create our documentary about? And that was a play on words. Documentary. We're docking into a new meaning. We're docking into a new means. The golden means is our spiral of creation from one perspective. And it's in real time. So it's live. It's not a documentary about what happened a year ago. It's happening now in real time. Because we've broken through this barrier, this bubble has been pushed out. And we've literally broken through the barrier that we were locked into down here. This was totally separate before. And we would poke through and get up there, and then we would poke through and get up there, and now those are merging. And we as light workers or humans are bridging that gap, holding out our hand by holding space, poking holes through this. As my friend Candace said, I'm pushing out the fog. And I see it again as bubbles. It's expanding out, and we're pushing into this, and we're touching the limits, right? The limits that we had before, kind of like the Truman Show. If I ran out of time, guys, I'm sorry, ironically enough. But so I was hearing make way. So we're making our own way. We're making a new way. We're creating space in the Milky Way. And this Milky Way has to do with this triangulation through the compression chamber. So what's happening is we're merging. A lot of us went through activations this year, right? So some of us had our crown activation all tingly up here. Some of us had stuff going on at the tailbone and the root. Some of us had a lot of things going on in the divine feminine, divine masculine. Some of us had a lot going on. Right now I'm getting a lot about solar plexus, by the way. A lot of us had throat. My throat activations came on strong, what, 4 years ago now. But what's happening is all of those are merging, triunification, masculine, feminine, inner child, all through source connection in this triad, and it's sweeping all of this together. And essentially it's creating this implosion or compression that then bursts out and expands us out into a completely different reality. The Milky Way. I know that there's a linear definition why the Milky Way is called that, but from my play on words, it's the milk, the nectar, and the honey. So the milk is being released through the king's chamber. Our king, our crown, our head, our skull, okay? Wrapping around the ventricular columns is what I'm hearing. Into the ventricular aorta, into a new order, not the new order that everybody's talking about, the real new ordering of our reality. This is not a hierarchy. It has to do with the ringing of the spheres. It has to do with the rings of harmony. My friend Kat calls it, right? You're literally ringing in the ears, hearing all of it's coming online. And we're merging together the density with the higher frequencies and combusting through the king's chamber. It's a combustion to take us into our ascension. And from one perspective, the king's chamber and the pyramids was used to create ascension. We'll say through technology, through the knowledge of the technology. We're doing it in our own physical technology, in our body. We are the embodiment. We are the skin suit technology. What they were trying to accomplish in the king's chamber, from one perspective, there's lots of different perspectives about the pyramids and what they do. This is only one layer. That was able to triangulate in order to ascend. For in the lower densities, from one perspective, again, it was too scrambled. They couldn't get there without help. And that was how they did it from one perspective. We're doing it through our heart, through all of this coming online with our higher aspects, and we're embodying ascension. And that's a linear, multidimensional perspective of how all of that works. So if you look at this triangulation, it's lining us up with a different geometric place, and it's also changing in the Milky Way our alignment with all of the other galaxies and stars. So that's another video. So we're now able to consistently hold that space and hold our hands out, whereas before we weren't able to hold it, and it wouldn't allow us to implode into the next dimension, so to speak. That's one way of looking at it. I'm hearing that we were on a time loop. I'm hearing a lot about our exoskeleton. So our existential awareness, our existence, we're standing in it. It's a standing wave or sine wave. I always get those confused, but we're standing in our own royalty. Our king's chamber is dripping, the milk is moving through the ram horns, through the pineal, down the throat, into the heart, and we're getting the charge coming up from the bottom, the kundalini, the coil, the rings. Again, who are we? The higher knowing of this space is part of this as well. It's not about knowledge. It's about moving, I'm hearing, past the ledge. So it's like we've come up and we recognize we were on this level, and that's all we were able to see before from one perspective. Now we've jumped off the ledge and we're floating, right? We're in this space of expansion. So this our exoskeleton is essentially creating this space in which we are docking into, because I was getting messages about the documentary, right? Docking into a new meaning. I'm hearing elementary, dear Watson. It's like we're able to then access this whole other space. And this is so many layers. I'm just starting this video number 1. All right, so we're consistently doing this. It's no longer a scribble in the dark. We've become the scribes. We are the royalty embodied, and all of our blood is singing. And that's what happens when we get into a place of coherence. Our blood sings, our crystals We are not meant to be stagnant. So this lower frequencies in which we were creating from, let's call it 3D, just to be linear for a moment. Not that 3D is linear, but you get where I'm going with this. It was finite. We are infinite. Yet we are also permanently impermanent. So our physical form is not permanent. Therefore, it's not stagnant. And I'm being guided to talk a little bit about this. I may run out of time. But we are infinite, all right? But we are creating in a finite reality from one perspective. And that lower field of density that's cracking and falling apart that we are basically reabsorbing, all right? No, nothing goes to waste. We are not wasting. We are reabsorbing this. And so our bodies are going through this, Earth is going through it, and we're doing it on an energetic level. There are those, I'm kind of in 10 different bubbles right now. There are those who are not able to, again, I mentioned see the hand, the helping hand. And there are those that don't want to see it. And that's going to be their choice. I'm being guided to really remind everybody that we always have a choice. And even though we may not have had a choice from one perspective before in the older field because we were being held hostage, so to speak, our energy was being used, whatever we want to go on that linear storyline, are we going to listen to that documentary or are we going to create our own documentary, right? What's the higher meaning? What do we value? Do we value that story enough to only support that story? Or can we merge the two? Can we merge the truth and these other frequencies with the higher we are one energy, forgiveness and neutrality and compassion? And that's where there's a lot of this, I'm not sure where I want to be. So we have that choice constantly to be up-leveling. And, okay, I kind of went all over the place on that one. Charge and a new structure. It's a new time structure. I'll get maybe into more of that in the next video. But self-worth, I was getting this reference to our value system. And SE is I know, right? Per se. So what do we know? It's not based on the knowledge of these stories. It's an inner knowing. It's the king's chamber. It's the king me, crown me. I've won. I am one, right? So many different ways that we can play with this. And what happens is this creates this canal for us to literally, we're not slingshotting, we're literally arrow through time. We are breaking the sound barrier. I was hearing the words earlier, terminal velocity. So there will be those who it's too fast for them. The speed is too much. It's too high of a vibration. And those are the ones that are choosing, for the most part, from that perspective, right? I'm trying to do very multidimensional. They don't want to be in that space. It's too uncomfortable. It isn't what they want to experience. They really like the density. They like the control. They like that, playing from that space. And it isn't necessarily, from my perspective, our job to understand that. It's just, that's their choice. And some of us, I know, it's like, how could you choose that? But that's their choice. That's the freedom of choice. So they're choosing that reality. And that terminal velocity, it's literally terminal.